So what I learned from research processes was that before I took Bunny 1301 and 1302, I had very few experiences on doing research for classes, and all the ones I did in the past were simple. They didn't ask for me to come up with a research from my own, from scratch. Rather, they just asked to do a research on already done studies. So as I conducted my own research this semester, I decided to carry on interviews that would help me get an answer to my research question. I had difficulty trying to come up with questions that would answer my problem, since it was my second time making interviews, and I overcame it by asking exactly what I wanted to hear. And my question was about how the Mexican American culture impact adult student learning. So I directly asked Mexican American college students how do they learn best, and how does knowing two languages at once impact their learning at school, and if it was important for teachers to implement both languages into their daily lessons. And that was how I would end up getting my answer, by asking the proper questions that could later help me support my argument. And you can see the set of questions I asked in my interviews. Here's an example. So I asked both female and male, Mexican American, and these are the interview questions. I first had to test the interviews, and then I changed the question, because before I had it, are you bilingual? If so, what language? But I wanted to ask exactly what I wanted to hear, so I asked, are you Mexican American? Because that was my research question to begin with. Then I wanted to know if my interviewees, how they were introduced to the English language. So I asked, were they born in the US or were they raised in the US? To know when they got introduced to the language. These are two set of interviews, and the first interviewee, she wasn't born in the US nor raised, but then she transferred to the US in high school, so that's when she got introduced to the English. So I had a variety of students, so I could work with the questions. And this second interviewee was born in the US and raised in the US, so he had a different experience with the English language. So what I'm walking away with is that I now know how to create my own research and work with primary sources of my own. I know how to ask the questions to get the answer I want and to work with it. The second one I chose is integrating secondary sources and writing with authority. And what I learned is all my years in high school, I only worked with few secondary sources, but I was taught to use them to support my argument and not to critique. I could never fully support my research back in my high school years, or at least I thought that I was repeating the same thing over and over again. And this new method was eye-catching and different because I could never emphasize my point of view instead of just agreeing with the article's perspective. I learned a new method of criticizing an article in order to come up with a research question and then further leading to a creation of a whole new research. I'm now able to properly introduce my secondary sources and point them out on what they're missing, which is called a gap. Here's an example of how I separated the 4 sources I got with the claims and supporting evidence of each one of them. And over here, I wrote down what they were focusing on. So one was focusing on only bilingual elementary students, the other one was on kindergarten, and the other one was with different cultures and generalizing Hispanic students. So I ended up getting that they don't go deep on doing research in older students. So that was my focus. That was the gap. This will be another example of how I separated my sources. So I was asked to put the information of when they were posted and their claims, if they were qualified or not, where I got them, if they were educational or not. And all the 4 sources I got were educational. And here's where I talk about the claim, the purpose, the audience, and some few quotes I got, and the connection between the articles. So here I connected 2 articles that were similar. They both talked about how the language and the environment affect Hispanic children. But these 2, they only focus on early learning, like elementary schools. And over here, this is another source I got, and I compared the other 2 sources left, and here's a connection. And this is more, they were focusing more on assimilation, how it was affecting the students' learning. How instead of helping them, it was just harming them, how they were being forced to assimilate to the English language. So this is how I separate my sources, and I would never do that before Bonnie's class, and I really enjoy it, and it was really effective to conduct my own research. It was really solid and clean to put it in my research and talk about it the way I had it here listed. And what I'm walking away with is that I now know how to break the sources apart, and instead of supporting them, I could critique them and see what they're missing, and that will be my focus to explain in my own research. Lastly, what I learned is peer feedback. And I have never done peer feedback before, like how I did it in 1301 and 1302 with Bonnie. Before, in high school, we were usually asked to share our papers with partners to let them read it and check it for errors. But as we got our papers back, I will notice that they would only fix grammatical errors instead of actually checking at the content. In Bonnie's class, now we had the chance to specifically ask where we need help with and how do we want the help. We have a proper way to ask for feedback to be more effective when giving it and receiving it. Here's an example of how I asked Bonnie for help, and I told her where I was having trouble explaining my interview results and what I've already done, and what I want for her to help me with. And here it's what she told me to do, and she told me what I needed. She said where I needed improvement and how I could improve. She gave me ideas. Like I asked for examples. She told me to make a paragraph for each major idea, and that's what I did. I had a really short paragraph just stating what I got from my interviews, the answers I got, and now I extended the paragraph and even included a quote to better explain the answers I got. And here it is, what I did. And what I'm walking away with is that I now know how to properly ask for help in my essays or any research whatsoever in order to get what I'm asking for. Also, I know how to put the meaning of my answers in my research